Good evening, folks. I am doing number 2 in the countdown of Cigarette Burns, which is the second greatest movie of all time. And it is the infamous, the famous, the usually considered number 1 film of all time, Citizen Kane. Why Citizen Kane? I am sure that a great many of you have not seen the film. I'll be honest. Let's start with that basic assumption that most of you have not had the pleasure of watching Citizen Kane. Okay, so we have to start from that basic assumption. When I teach any type of class, I assume that you have not read the literature nor care. This is Citizen McCain. I'm sorry, Citizen McCain. I'm sorry, Citizen Kane. Okay. It is Orson Welles', I wouldn't say it's his masterpiece. I have definitely seen better films from Orson Welles, but this is one that they generally consider to be his best. Okay, it's a very storied career, especially around this particular story. He had just come off Broadway and radio at that time when he had made this. RKO gave him complete control of the production, which he used to his full advantage. He invented several different camera techniques in direct defiance to Sergei Eisenstein's theories on filmmaking, which we will get into. Again, I don't want to bore you because this is not necessarily a film class, although film class stuff is used in it. Okay, but this is why it is considered to be one of the greatest movies of all time. Cinematically, it's good. It has a great story. It's a tragedy. It's not one that makes you feel particularly good to be alive, but it is still a story all the same. It's about a man who becomes very rich. He runs his own newspaper, and he ultimately goes off and builds an island himself, where he lives with his wife until she leaves, and then he just has his servants, and he dies. And he says the famous words, "Rosebud," and nobody can figure out what it means. So a reporter, after his death, does kind of investigation with some of his friends and colleagues as to what that would have meant, and they have no idea. And then you find out at the end of the film that Rosebud was his childhood sled, which had been stored in his basement and forgotten about. And it was the one thing he wanted to remember at the very end of his life. So that is how that goes. The reason I say it is because there was a great short movie, or not short movie, but a movie made in the 90s. I think it had John Malkovich. It's called RKO 281 or something. It was whatever the number of Citizen Kane was. And anyway, they're letting people into the theater for the premiere, and they keep saying, "Hey, Rosebud is the sled," which I thought was very funny. Orson Welles was a truly unique man to cinema. So I'm gonna talk a little bit more about Orson Welles than I'm actually going to talk about the movie, because the movie is the movie. You can watch it, you can like it, you can dislike it. It really doesn't make a difference. There are several reasons, and I just named them as to why it's considered to be the greatest movie of all time. Okay, but I'm not so much interested in Citizen Kane because if you really dive into Orson Welles' film, he has, in my opinion, at least 2 or 3 films that are better, and I haven't seen all of his films yet. Okay, so I do believe that Citizen Kane is definitely a great film, don't get me wrong, but I do believe he has some better. My personal favorite of his is a movie called The Trial, which is a Franz Kafka adaptation, which stars Anthony Perkins. It's a very, very good movie, very bizarre, very dreamlike, totally underrated in the film canon, and I believe I have it listed as maybe 33, maybe even in the 20s of the greatest films of all time. That I don't know. The reason I don't list it very high is because no one else does. I think, in my personal opinion, it should be about maybe 12 or 11 of the greatest films of all time. But again, I'm going for what is a meta thesis of this. Let me see if I can find it here. Oops, I went too far. Let me take a look. Okay. Orson Welles is The Trial. I have it listed as 35, right before right before Some Like It Hot and right after Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That seems very fair. Okay, so, wow, I am so fair in my assessments of film. So, again, what we're talking about here is what, again, people would argue is the greatest film of all time. But I want to talk about Orson Welles and what happened before the making of this film, because that's far more interesting. My puppers has come here. I don't think Minnesota won today, so I apologize. He's probably not wearing it because Minnesota did not win today. Usually when Minnesota wins, he'll wear his jersey for the next couple of days. I don't think they won. They may have, though. I'll have to double check the scores. If they have, then he'll be wearing his jersey soon. Um, so Orson Welles was what many people consider to be a child prodigy. He was very talented in the arts from a very young age. He took a when he got to college, he was not particularly into the college scene, so he went off to, I believe, Ireland, where he painted and did some plays and stuff in Ireland before he went ultimately back to New York City. Now you have to understand that when he was in New York City, this was during the time of the Great Depression, so being an actor was, I'm sure, very very hard at that time. But he had had some experience and he got very talented very quickly. He became friends with Joseph Cotten during that time. Joseph Cotten was in a million movies. You need to just look up his name. He was in Hitchcock movies. He was in all kinds of movies. He was in one of my favorite of Marilyn Monroe's, which was called Niagara, and that is a very, very good film, and I highly recommend that you watch that because Niagara is a very, very good film, and it should be up higher than where it's at in the canons because it was her best film. Well, at least as far as I've seen so far. Hey bud, you tired, huh? Did you play all day and now you're tired, bud? Want to get some sleep? Yeah, I betcha. I betcha. So, him and Joseph became friends, and he became a play director. So, during the time that he was a play director, he had a very famous play come out, which was an adaptation of the Shakespearean story Macbeth, except he took it in a Haitian way because he was working with black actors. So he took it as a Voodoo Macbeth, is basically what it was called. It was very, very popular and was the trend for a while, and it got him a chance to do his own radio show. Because at that time, even though film existed, television, I don't, well, it was 30, so yeah, television it had not started yet. So what you had instead of television was radio. So he did his radio stuff, he was very popular, and then he made the infamous War of the Worlds broadcast, just around this time, too. It was in October when he did it. So, that scared the hell out of a lot of people. It scared the hell out of at least three people. I think that we can definitely confirm. There was one person that ran into a church in Indianapolis and said the world was ending, and then ran out. And just different stuff like that. So after all that, he was given a shot by RKO to make his first movie, which was in fact Citizen Kane, and this is what came out of that. Okay. One of the most infamous parts of Citizen Kane is that he shot and reshot the lighting of the cigarette with a butler that said, "I know what Rosebud is." About, I think he said 50 times. It was his first shot, and he wanted to get an idea of where he was going. I assume it's because he wanted to get an idea of how thematically he wanted the film to look, which is why he shot it so many times. He could have been obsessive. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But as the camera came off the tracks and smashed, and they almost closed production just based on that, because cameras are very, very expensive. I don't know if you guys realize this, but cameras can be millions of dollars. So when you break a camera, it's not a good thing. I don't even know if they had insurance on it. Who knows? But they almost stopped it there. And then William Randolph Hearst, who ran newspapers, he knew it was about his life, and he tried to have the film blocked. And eventually it got through, and it became what it was, and it didn't even win the Oscar for Best Picture. So, keep that in mind when you watch any type of awards programs, that sometimes they don't get what's really going on and what's really important. But that's okay, because we're all human, and we all do things according to what we think is correct at the time. But regardless, it is in that. So I just gave you a little bit of background on Orson Welles. And that's the thing, is that he had a very storied life. He went off after that, made a couple more Hollywood pictures, ultimately became disillusioned with Hollywood, and did a lot of independent cinema and in Europe for the rest of his life. I believe that's where Chimes of Midnight comes from. I know F for Fake was. And I believe The Trial was also made in Europe and things like that. And there are very funny ads of Orson Welles selling wine, French wine or wine, being drunk because he had to pay his bills. But, he was also a celebrity. He was on many roasts and different things like that. And everybody seemed to have a good time when he was there and blah, blah, blah. I've always liked the man. I'm sure he was difficult to work with, though. I can almost guarantee you he was difficult to work with. But that was the time, and, well, I'm sure there are still directors that are difficult to work with even now. I mean, they run basically million-dollar productions, and let's just say that imperfection is not one of their favorite things. So that's kind of how all that went. I genuinely believe that of all the greatest filmmakers of all time, him and Sergei Eisenstein are in the top two, as far as great filmmakers, because they made artistic films. Whereas John Huston and Alfred Hitchcock and Stanley Kubrick and who's the last one? Huston, Kubrick. I know I'm forgetting one, but that's okay. Oh, John Ford. All make great films, but they also wanted to be in the commercial scene. So these are the true great artists of filmmaking are Sergei Eisenstein and Orson Welles. Okay, so if you ever want to watch true filmmaking art, please do watch those two films because they are extremely good. They're always cut really well, they're always done really well, and they are true artistic masterpieces. As I said, number three was Battleship Potemkin. Sergei has quite a few in the top 30. I believe he has three, maybe three. I know October is one of them. And Wells is hard to place, to be honest with you, because all of his films are so uniquely different that you really have to understand what filmmaking is in order to understand. Like, for instance, F for Fate is told to you as a documentary. If it is or not remains to be seen. But his whole thesis on it is how can we really tell a masterwork from just a forger? And that was kind of his thesis on that one. It was a very good thesis, and he did it very well. I still have not seen Chimes of Midnight, and there are a handful of Orson Welles films that I still haven't seen, but that's okay because I will watch Chimes of Midnight, and it will be great. I kind of saved that one. That one, there's only two films that I really saved for watching in the future. One was a Jamie Cagney movie called White Heat, and the other is Chimes of Midnight. I want to watch those a little bit later so I have a little chance to appreciate them more at an older age. But as I said before, Citizen Kane is a great work of art. If you want to watch a great work of art and a master director making what is considered to be his seminal work, then this is it for you. As I said before, there are many films that I prefer to Welles, and you're always free to send me an email to get my list on Orson Welles' films that I really enjoy. I'd be more than happy to answer that for you. But from the fact that he created deep focus in this, which is a way of shooting with a what's called a short lens, which if you know anything about film lenses, a short lens is kind of like a bubble. Okay, what it does is it creates great focus and depth. It gives you great depth because you understand that when you're looking at a picture, it's not three-dimensional, right? We assume three-dimension based on shadow and understanding of how if you take multiple pictures back to back to back and create movement, that there's depth in that field, okay? Or when a painter paints, they paint trees smaller in the back and trees that are closer larger. They just do that to create depth of focus, okay? But this was a way that he took a short lens and was able to encompass everything in a single shot to give you kind of the ideologue of what was going on. And there's a very famous scene where the young Charles Foster Kane is outside playing and his family is discussing the future. And if you break that all down, there are many reasons why he shot it that way. But they're all significant because the window that shows Charles playing is in the center because he's the center of what's going on. And you have the banker on the right or whatever, and then the parents on the left. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. He also, when Charles ultimately lost the election to become governor, instead of shooting him from top down, which is the traditional style, probably more invented by the French or really capitalized with Sergei Eisenstein, which shows diminutiveness, which shows powerlessness, he chose to shoot him from the ground up, which gives you a great sense that he is bigger than life, which is a very interesting shot choice for that particular moment when there really is a low of his life, losing there, and ultimately losing his friendship. There's a million things that go into this story. I would always recommend watching documentaries about the movie. Citizen Kane is relatively easy to buy or watch because RKO doesn't exist anymore. I believe Turner Classic Movies is the one that bought RKO's films. So, I believe maybe Turner Classic Online has a lot of RKO's films. RKO is also famous for making King Kong, which is one of the greatest movies of all time. I believe I put it at number 10 in the top 10 movies of all time because it is the first story to come out of Hollywood that is an actual story. like a kind of a folk tale. It's kind of an American folk tale. Guy goes out to try to get a giant beast, ultimately finds that it can't be put in the city. The beast dies but protects the lady. I mean, these are all kind of like classic zeitgeist, folk talian sorts of mythery, for lack of a better word. But that came from RKO too. And again, what I recommend is, if you can, watch Turner Classic Movies. There's so many great classic movies that exist, and they really give you a sense of where we've come. Look at this dog. Look how happy this dog is. This dog is so happy. He's just laying there getting petted. He just love it. But yeah, absolutely, guys, go out and watch Turner Classic Movies. Now that we're kind of getting to the end of the list, I just want to encourage you to watch old movies because they are really, really good, and they still have something to say. In fact, one of the ones that I'll be doing soon after the list is done is the movie Network, because I believe that it's just as valid from the 70s as it is today. Yes, some of the corporations have changed, but ultimately the story is just as salient as it was even, what is that now? 70s, 80s, 90s, zeros, 10s, 50 years ago. 70s were 50, almost 50 years ago. Wow. That was a long time, but that movie is still as poignant as it was today. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let it go at that. And Mojo says goodbye. I'm going to check the Vikings score. If you see him tomorrow in his Vikings uniform, it means the Vikings won. So until then, Al Vidazen.